Hi everyone. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about operations with trigonometry, more specifically, fractional operations with trigonometry. So first I want to review how to multiply fractions. There are two ways you can handle multiplying fractions. Option one is multiply straight across, tops with tops, bottoms with bottoms, and then simplify. So if you take a look at this first example, if we do it that way, we can do tops with tops. 8 times 3 is 24, and then 2 times 4 is 8, and that simplifies to 3. Another way to do this is to cross simplify, not cross multiply, cross simplify. What that means is anything on top with anything on the bottom can be simplified. So I'm always going to try a cross. So 8 and 4, they're both divisible by 4. That's the biggest number that goes into each of them. So you cross them off and you say, okay, 8 divided by 4 gives me 2. And then you go to this one, you cross it off and you say 4 divided by 4 gives me 1. And then you can keep simplifying this top with this bottom, and 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. Then once you're done cross simplifying, you multiply straight across. So tops with tops, 1 times 3 is 3, and 1 times 1 is 1, and 3 times 1 gives me 3. So you see, either way, you can still arrive at the same answer. So now how would this apply with trigonometry? So same thing. We're going to multiply straight across in option 1. So 1 times sine squared theta is sine squared theta. Now, on the bottom, we're going to multiply sine of theta times cos of theta. This is the same thing as multiplying 1 over x times x squared over y, where x is sine and cos is y. Sine squared would simply be x squared. So it's okay. When you multiply x and y, you can't multiply them together, so you just write them next to each other. So this would be sine of theta times cosine of theta. Similarly here, where this would be 1 times x squared is x squared, x times y is xy. And we can simplify this now by saying, okay, there's 2 squareds on top, 1 squared on the bottom. So the leftover x, when you divide them, is on top. So same thing here. Sine squared can cross off with sine, and sine squared means there's 2 of them on top, so there's 1 left over on the top, and the bottom one cancels out, and you're left with sine over cos. Okay, the next one. You can say that 1 over sine of theta, you can call sine of theta x, and sine squared is x squared, and we can call cosine y. So when I'm multiplying or cross simplifying, you can simplify that this one divides out by this with a leftover x. So therefore, this one and this one divide out. The leftover x or the leftover sine of theta is on top. So that's cross simplifying, and then multiply straight across. Sine theta times 1 is sine of theta, and cos theta is what's left on the bottom. So sine theta over cos theta. And if you even want to take this a step further, you can. We know that sine of theta over cosine of theta is tan theta. We know that from the unit circle. Okay, let's talk about dividing fractions. We know when we divide fractions, we keep, change, flip. This should say division. So we're going to keep the 2 over 1. That's how we make it a fraction. We're going to change the division to multiplication, and then we're going to flip the 1/4 to 4 over 1. And we're going to multiply straight across. 2 times 4 is 8. 1 times 1 is 1, so 8. Same thing with trigonometry. We're going to keep the top fraction. We're going to change the division to multiplication, and we're going to flip the last fraction. So we're going to keep the 1 over cos theta. We're going to change the division to multiplication, and then we're going to flip the last fraction. So sine of theta over cosine of theta. And then we multiply straight across. So 1 times sine of theta is sine of theta. Cosine of theta times cosine of theta is cosine squared theta, not 2. Remember, it's the same thing as saying 1 over x times, we'll call sine y, y over x. Tops times tops is y. X times x is x squared, not 2x. So this would be my final answer. All right, let's take a look at the back. Adding and subtracting fractions. So in order to add or subtract fractions, the denominators must be the same. If they're not, you need to make a common denominator. So here, the first one, we have 3/4 minus 1/4. Since the denominators are the same, we can simply say that that is 2/4, which reduces to 1/2. Now in problem number 2, the denominators are not the same, so we have to make them the same. So 2 and 4, we can multiply this side by 2, and then that gives me 4. So 8 times 2 is 16 over 4 plus 3 over 4, which is a final answer of 19 over 4. So when adding fractions, the denominator stays the same once it's the same, and then you simply add or subtract the tops. Okay, let's take a look at now with trig. So first things first, I notice that I have a fraction here, but I don't have a fraction here. So I have to put this over 1. Now I'm just going to rewrite it so that it's a little easier to see. I like to line up my numerators and I like to line up my denominators. So we need a common denominator between cos and 1. Well, that common denominator is just going to be cos. So we have 1 over cos minus cosine times cosine is cosine squared. And 1 times cos is just cos. So since the denominators are the same, we keep it the same, and we add or subtract the tops. Since 1 and cosine squared are not like terms, we just leave it as 1 minus cosine squared. And eventually you're going to learn what this equals, and we can simplify it a little bit further. But for now, this is how we make a common denominator. Okay, next, 1 over sine of theta plus 1 over cos of theta. These aren't the same. Treat them like denominators of 1 over x plus 1 over y. Since I can't multiply anything by x to get y and vice versa, when you can't find a common denominator easily like that, you just multiply them by each other. And whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. That's just how we make that common denominator. So here, there's nothing I can multiply sine by to get cos and vice versa, so we're going to multiply them by each other. So this gets multiplied by cos theta. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. And this one gets to be multiplied by sine of theta. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So cosine of theta times 1 is cos. And the bottom, cosine theta times sine theta, is just cos theta times sine theta. Just like multiplying xy is just xy. Next, 1 times sine of theta is sine of theta. And then the bottom, cosine of theta times sine of theta, is just cosine of theta sine theta. So now that the denominators are the same, the rule says we keep them the same. So cosine theta sine theta. And then we just add the tops. So we can't add x and y together. They're two different things. So we just write it as cosine of theta plus sine of theta. And that's it. That would be our final answer. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking, well, can I cross off the coses and cross off the sines? The answer is no. You cannot cross them off because the numerator is attached by addition. So we're going to explore this tomorrow more in class, but the main goals that we wanted to get down today were, do we know the rules for adding and subtracting fractions, and do we know the rules for multiplying and dividing? So make sure you come in with questions tomorrow, and we'll start from there. Have a great night.